I got a message with you. The Antichrist. What if the number of the beast isn't just a barcode in some distant future? What if it's already embedded in the fabric of our world, in the earth's spin, in the air we breathe, and even in your blood? Brothers and sisters, the veil is lifting in 2026, and the God of this world has a plan that I'm about to expose to you. You need to hear this. Science is catching up to prophecy faster than anyone has ever imagined, and today I am going to connect the dots that blow your mind. Let me ask you a very serious question. Does Jesus say that Satan is the god of this world? We know that Satan is the god of this world. He is the prince of the power of the air. He is the ruler of this world. In Ephesians 2:2, it tells us he's the prince and power of the air. In John 12:31, it says the ruler of this world will be cast out. And then we have Revelation 13, where it says he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name, the beast, or the number of his name. And what is that number? Here is wisdom. Let him who understands calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Well, let's take a quick look at that and see where we see the number 666 in the world all around us. And it may not be what you think. Number one, the Earth's orbital speed, the speed at which it goes around the sun, is 66,600 miles per hour. The curvature of the Earth is 8 inches per square mile, so that the curvature that we can see after 1 mile is 0.666%. Earth's axial tilt is 23.4 degrees. That means that it is 66.6 degrees off from a true 90-degree angle. It's not straight up and down like it should be. It's 66.6 degrees off. It's crooked, not upright. Unironically, in order to even see the curvature of the Earth, you have to get above the 60,000-foot marker. Are we seeing a pattern here? Let me ask you another question. What is all living matter made from on this planet? The answer, carbon. Guess what? A neutral carbon-12 atom contains 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. And guess what? Carbon has a bunch of different allotropes and isotopes, and one specific allotrope is carbon graphene. And this is a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in a hexagonal lattice. You know what that means? 6 sides. 666 with 6 sides. Now, research has been funded by the National Institute of Health and conducted by various companies focusing on using graphene for sensing and delivering genetic material. How does the National Institute of Health and graphene tie into this? Well, let's think Revelation 18:23, and we'll get back to that verse again in the very near future here. But it says, by your sorcery, all the nations were deceived. Now, I'm not saying that the National Institute of Health is the Antichrist or that they're producing the mark right now, but I do believe that one day the technology that they are currently researching could fall into the hands of the Antichrist and be used improperly. Graphene-based biosensors can use the electrical properties of graphene to detect specific DNA sequences or gene mutations. Here's something they use: CRISPR chips. Researchers developed a handheld device called a CRISPR chip that uses graphene transistors to detect gene mutations within minutes. It's shown to be able to detect 2 genetic mutations in blood samples from patients with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's also used for cancer detection. The scientists at the University of Illinois have used crumpled graphene to develop an ultra-sensitive biosensor for detecting trace amounts of cancer-related DNA biomarkers in the blood. So they can actually look at the blood and see where is the DNA for cancer located. And what are they going to do when they find that? They also use it for nanopore sequencing. Graphene's single atom thickness makes an ideal membrane for nanopore-based DNA sequencing, where DNA strands are passed through tiny holes into material. Why are they trying to sequence DNA? What does that mean? That sounds to me like it's some sort of alteration of some sort. Graphene is being explored as a carrier for delivering genetic material, DNA, and RNA into cells. Where have we heard that recently in the past 6 years? This offers a non-viral alternative to traditional delivery methods. And what is it being used for? Gene therapy. Graphene oxide has been shown to be an effective vehicle for delivering plasmid DNA into cells with low toxicity and high efficiency. It's also been used to plant genetics. Scientists have used graphene-based nanostructures to deliver gene editing materials into plant cells in order to improve genetic transformation. Oh, so they're not coming out and saying outright that they're altering or editing DNA, but they're putting things in there that can alter and edit the DNA, but they're not doing it directly themselves. Is that what I'm supposed to believe here? Some research even indicates that graphene nanoparticles might cause DNA damage or alter gene expression in cells under specific conditions. And other studies have found that graphene oxide can interfere with DNA replication. So it means it messes up how your DNA reproduces, and it can cause mutations at a molecular level. And though this is part of toxicity research, I think that there's something to be said here. Now, listen to this. The smallest device that we have is known as a CRISPR chip is 100 bases. A 100 base pair strand would therefore be about 34 nanometers long. A normal human red blood cell is a bioconcave disc with a diameter of about 6 to 8 micrometers. Compared with a DNA strand, this diameter can be converted into nanometers since 1 micrometer equals 1,000 nanometers. A red blood cell is 6 to 8,000 nanometers in diameter. Think about that. So a single DNA strand is smaller than a red blood cell by about 6 to 8 times. However, a CRISPR chip is 1% the size of a DNA strand. That's how small they can make machines that they're using to sense mutations in genes and deliver materials to genes in order to create a new type of gene. So we see that carbon graphene is very small, and it's already being used to alter DNA by inserting stuff into the DNA. Now, here's something we need to think about. We have to think about the very base of DNA. DNA uses 3-letter codons to form its code. Each letter can be one of 4 bases. That's A, T, C, or G. And that gives us 4 to the third power, or 4 times 4 times 4, which creates 64 possible codons. Now, when we have to think about something, they are taking DNA and using the CRISPR gene to create material that has 6 base pairs instead of 4 base pairs. So instead of ATCG, they have 2 extra base pairs, which are X and Y is what they're called. And we'll get into that in a second. Now, with the 4 base pairs, you get 4 times 4 times 4, or 4 to the third power of potential possible codons, which is 64 possible codons in a naturally occurring element. But when you look at the adding on 2 base pair, you suddenly have 6 base pair. Now you have 6 base pair to the third power. What's that? 6 times 6 times 6. And it represents a larger possible alphabet as 2 base pairs are added. And that's exactly what genetic engineers are experimenting with right now using the CRISPR technology. We know that they've been editing and altering genes. That's not a surprise. They did it with some twins. They took out a gene that would cause them to have some sort of cancer or something like that in China. And it's, what is X and Y? When you think, do you think XY equals male? I do. That's what I think. XY, man. 6 times 6 times 6. Wow, we've got the mark of the beast and we've got XY. If I saw 6 times 6 times 6 and XY, I'd say, well, somebody's trying to say that's the mark of the beast. That's my own conclusion. You can draw your own conclusion. That means that 216 possible amino acid codes exist if you add in 2 more extra base pairs. That's more than triple the normal 64, giving scientists the ability to create entirely new proteins and thus really entirely new lives with new properties never found before in nature. So 6 to the third power equals 216. That represents the expanded genetic code of synthetic life, a new language beyond creation's natural 4-letter code. Now, what this looks like in gene editing is 6 to the third power, 216 structures appear in practice. The DNA sequence contains unnatural base pairs like X and Y mixed with ATCG, and then specialized enzymes or polymerases and CRISPR-like systems must be used to reprogram to read the new letters. The cell must also be equipped to translate the new codons, meaning that new tRNAs, ribosomes, and amino acids have to be introduced. And then here's a visual concept of what this looks like. In gene editing, 6 to the third power literally shows up when you add the 2 extra base pairs, extending it beyond 64 to 216. Now, I was thinking about this. We saw this back in the past, right? I thought to myself while I was doing this research, is there any evidence that dinosaurs might have had, or what they call dinosaurs, I wouldn't call them dinosaurs, might have had 6 base pairs instead of just 4 base pairs because they're so different from anything, right? Well, there was. In 2020, surprisingly, studies indicated that they had discovered a dinosaur whose cells preserved chemical markers that represent DNA fragments with a minimum length of 6 base pairs. Is that a coincidence? No, especially if you watch the first video where I talked about how the mark of the beast actually showed up in the book of Revelation, or in the book of Genesis all the way to the book of Revelation. But go back and watch that so you can understand what I'm talking about here. Is this a coincidence? No, because if you look it up, there are no naturally occurring organisms that have 6 base pairs. Those extra 2 base pairs are synthetic. What does that mean? Does that mean that dinosaurs might have been synthetic? No, maybe they did actually have 6 base pairs that was naturally occurring, but now we're reproducing that. What's that going to look like? But as far as we know, no naturally occurring organism has 6 base pairs. And interestingly, they make a reference to this in the movie about a certain extraterrestrial having 6 base pairs who has to phone home, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. And they said that he had 6 base pairs. So when did dinosaurs exist? They existed after the fall, before the flood. And we could say that they were giants even. Okay. They existed after the fall and before the flood. Would you say that's in the days of Noah? Yes, it is. So if dinosaurs had an unnatural, non-synthetic number of base pairs and they existed before the flood, would that be something that we would see in the future when it comes to times of the end? Jesus did say, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be in the end of days. Isn't that interesting? So that means that if it was happening in the times of Noah, that it should be happening now if we're in the end of days. Well, guess what? It is. Okay, I think I got it. In 2017, researchers at the Scripps Research Institute successfully engineered an E. coli bacterium with a 6-letter genetic alphabet that could replicate the unnatural XY base pairs, produce proteins with new amino acids, and maintain stable inheritance of this unnatural DNA across generations, meaning they altered DNA, gave it the 6 base pair codon like dinosaurs had, and now it can replicate. So that organism literally has operated on a 6 times 6 times 6 coding system. So instead of having 64 possible codons, it now has 216 possibles. And this, my friends, is the first step towards programmable life forms. Okay? And where does that tie back into Revelation 18? It says, verses 23 and 24, the light of a lamp shall not shine in you anymore, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall not be heard in you anymore. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. The word for sorcery right there is none other than pharmakia, which is where we get the word pharmacy. And what does the National Institute of Health represent, if not pharmakia? And that, my friends, is where the mark of the beast comes into play. Now, here we're going to go into a little bit of fringe conspiracy theory, and it's not really conspiracy theory. We know that this isn't happening naturally. We know that the 6 base pairs is not naturally occurring. And then there's evidence that dinosaurs had 6 base pairs, which would mean that they were altered. You say, well, that doesn't make sense. They were altered. Oh, what were the angels doing? That would actually require you to go to the book of Enoch and discover that the angels were tampering with DNA, according to the book of Enoch. I don't even need the book of Enoch to prove that to you. I can prove that to you in our book, The Mark of the Beast from Creation to Revelation. I wrote it all out in a 200-page book. You should go read it. It's great. But that ties into the DNA of what we call extraterrestrials. So I came across this researcher who had said that he extensively studied extraterrestrial DNA from a crash site and from these extraterrestrial bodies that recovered. He said, you're probably familiar with the concept of intergenic region or junk DNA. These are basically DNA sequences that don't code for proteins. They're evolutionary residues, transposons, inactivated genes, and so on. To give you an idea, a human's intergenic regions represent approximately 99% of our genome. He said, I'm aware that these sequences aren't completely useless. They can be used as histone anchors and buffers to protect coding DNA from radiation or even as alternative open reading frames, but that's rather peripheral. What's particularly striking about the EBO genome, which is exobiospheric organism, which is what we call extraterrestrial, is the uniformity of these intergenic regions. We see some sequences repeated everywhere, and the distance in base pairs between the genes is virtually the same throughout their entire genome. The result is a minimalist, highly condensed genome. In fact, it's much smaller than ours. Moreover, the quantity of protein coding genes is even significantly lower than ours, probably due to the genetic refinement, but also to biological processes that are absent in EBO. The uniformity of these sequences is a major indication of the artificiality of these beings. There is no complex organism on Earth that has such elegance in its sequence. There is no evolutionary pressure that can lead to this kind of characteristic other than genetic engineering. I wouldn't be surprised to find out if these extraterrestrials actually had 6 base pairs instead of 4 base pairs, since we've learned they are not genetically natural, they're genetically unnatural. They're synthesized suits. Now, it was happening in the days of Noah in the beginning. It's happening even now. Now, think about this. Where does the beast come from? The beast comes from the pit of hell. And a lot of people say, well, he's going to be a Muslim. He's going to be Jewish. He comes from the Middle East. He's coming from Israel. He's coming from America. He's coming from France. But none of that is true. Revelation 17:8 says he was already here, but now he's dead and he's coming again. It says, the beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of where? The abyss, and go into destruction. The inhabitants of the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. What does that mean? How does he come up from the pit and have a physical body? I don't believe he does. I believe that they create a body for a spirit to inhabit, just like they do for these extraterrestrials, because their spirits go in and out of these bodies. And Lloyd Bushman talked about how when they die, their body just dies. They just use the body as a suit, and they jump from body to body, just like demons do. They go into human beings, into human bodies, but they want a body that they can control. They want a body that they can call theirs, that they can use. And this happens. I believe that they create a body for the Antichrist, and we see it kind of start to make sense in Daniel chapter 2. And it says, whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And as you saw, they will not adhere to one another. Iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men. So they mix themselves with something natural. but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the 10 toes represent the 10 kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces, consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So what were they doing? They were mixing iron with clay. To me, that sounds like they're mixing machine with flesh. And that is the final kingdom, or the kingdom of the Antichrist, that we see in Revelation 16, verses 12 through 14. And what we see here, so I believe that they're mixing iron with clay, representing mixing machines with flesh. And that, to me, would indicate genetic altering that's coming from an outside source. It says, the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the mouth of the beast, and the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of demons, performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to battle on the great day of God Almighty. Interesting that there are spirits inhabiting those creatures, and they're the ones that are actually performing the signs, and they're the spirits of demons. And what is the mark of the beast all about? It's all about altering and editing the image of God in exchange for the image of beast.